En fait, je vais commencer en français, but then I will speak in English. Just bear with me in my dual language education. So, this afternoon, well, first, quoi, je parle en français? Je sais plus. Ok, donc nous allons commencer une table ronde aujourd'hui avec le point de vue des étudiants. Je vais d'abord, ils vont se présenter et dans leur contexte. Alors, je vais vous demander tout de suite de vous présenter, peut-être par Bruno.
Ok. Bonjour, je m'appelle Bruno Sharp. Je suis un ancien diplômé de la faculté de sciences politiques de l'Université Simon Fraser à Burnaby, à Vancouver. On parle de notre programme, on parle un peu de notre parcours, c'est ça?
Oui.
OK. Donc, j'ai fait mes études secondaires en Alberta, dans un milieu majoritairement anglophone. Et je voulais continuer mes études en français et aussi poursuivre une carrière en natation au moment que je graduais, je nageais encore. Donc, j'ai décidé de poursuivre mes études en français à l'Université Simon Fraser dans un programme d'immersion. Et ce programme-là, j'ai gradué en 2015 et ensuite, je suis maintenant rendu à l'Université d'Ottawa et je viens de terminer ma deuxième année en droit. Il me reste une année.
Parfait, merci.
Je m'appelle Erika Copeland. Je suis inscrite dans un baccalauréat en arts spécialisé en psychologie ici à l'Université d'Ottawa. J'espère faire toutes mes études en immersion car pour moi, les langues sont très importantes, essentielles à la vie et mon identité. J'ai passé secondaire ainsi que primaire en immersion de français, puis aussi je suis trilingue et c'est une autre raison pourquoi j'essaie toujours de trouver les opportunités de parler, d'apprendre des nouvelles langues et les nouvelles cultures. Merci.
Salut, je m'appelle Kyle Halwalia, c'est un peu loin. Je suis un diplômé 2 fois de l'Université d'Ottawa, première fois en études internationales et langues modernes, régime d'immersion. Puis la deuxième fois, j'ai fait un petit virage, puis j'ai fait théorie théâtrale. J'ai fait une maîtrise en théorie théâtrale. Ça, c'était un programme uniquement en français. Je viens de Toronto. J'ai fait un régime de français intensif, Extended French, au secondaire. Fait que c'est comme le programme d'immersion, mais à partir de 7e année. Je viens d'un milieu assez anglophone à Toronto. Mais là, maintenant, je travaille dans les théâtres et en français et en anglais, mais surtout en français, ici à Ottawa, avec une des compagnies résidentes à la Nouvelle-Scène. Et j'enseigne de temps en temps comme chargé de cours ici à l'Université d'Ottawa au département de théâtre.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Laurence. Je suis une étudiante à l'Université de l'Alberta au campus Saint-Jean. Je viens juste de finir ma 3e année en sciences biologiques et je vais commencer ma 4e année l'année prochaine. Je suis originaire de l'Ontario et ensuite j'ai commencé ma carrière en français à Québec où j'ai fait la maternelle jusqu'à la 4e année. Ma mère est francophone et mon père est anglophone. Ensuite, on a déménagé à Edmonton où est-ce que c'est presque juste anglophone et j'ai fait le programme d'immersion débutant à la 5e année jusqu'à maintenant, ma 3e année d'université.
D'accord. Alors, just for those who maybe got here a bit later, Bruno comes from Simon Fraser University, Erika and Kyle from the University of Ottawa, and Laurence from Alberta. Laurence, juste un petit peu de précision. En Alberta, ça marche comment, l'immersion universitaire?
Mais, à vrai dire, j'ai toujours pensé que c'était l'immersion, mais de plus que je parle avec les personnes ici, je me rends compte que peut-être c'est plus un programme en français. Mais c'est vraiment semblable à ce qu'on a fait au secondaire et junior high, le primaire aussi. Donc, les cours sont enseignés en français et on doit aussi prendre des cours en anglais pour finir un bac bilingue. Mais malheureusement, il y a beaucoup de cours qui ne sont pas offerts au niveau plus avancé parce qu'il n'y a pas assez de demandes pour les prendre. Alors, pour compléter un bac au campus Saint-Jean, il faut prendre des cours au campus anglais. Alors, on ne peut pas éviter les cours anglais.
D'accord, d'accord. Merci beaucoup. Alors, I guess my first question is, how come you registered in the French immersion program? What pushed you to pursue your studies in French? Bruno?
If I'm to be perfectly frank, when I originally signed up to go to university, my main focus was not necessarily school per se, but it was to continue swimming. So I was looking at schools. I was looking at schools based on their swimming programs, and so I was kind of shopping around universities across Canada and what would be a good fit for me to swim. I did visit Simon Fraser University, and I visited the swim team. And the day before I went to visit the school, there was a recruiter who came to my high school and presented this program. I had never heard of it before. And it's a program where 75% of the courses are offered in French. There is a mandatory exchange to a French-speaking country or Quebec in your third year. And so when I got that presentation, after hearing that presentation, I arrived to SFU and I said, this is the school I want to come to, and this is the program I want to be in. And that's kind of what motivated me to get into the program. I have my mother is Francophone, and she is from Montreal or the suburbs of Montreal. And so for me, it's always been important to be able to go back home, to family, and be able to communicate with family. So that was also one of the reasons that I thought that the program that I took was a good fit. Do you want me to talk about the courses in the program that I took, or is that a later question?
Maybe later.
Okay.
Erika, toi?
Pour moi, il y a plutôt 3 raisons pourquoi j'ai décidé de m'inscrire chez l'Université d'Ottawa. Comme j'ai dit en avant, les langues sont très importantes pour moi. Ils font partie de mon identité internationale. Puis aussi, ils sont essentiels pour un futur, quoi que ce soit à l'étranger ou à Ottawa, car Ottawa est toujours bilingue et multilingue et multiculturel. As well, in my 11th year in high school, there was one of those promoters that came to my high school classroom and talked about the immersion program at the University of Ottawa. And I was still thinking at that point, what should I really be doing? And the way they described the program and some of the features that it has that we might go into later, it really fit who I was as a person and who I wanted to be as a bilingual individual and a student at the university. So I decided from that point on, it was like, yep, this might be the right one for me.
For me, it started far before university. My parents both took a couple French courses while they were in university. And so when I was 4 years old and they wanted to hide things from me, they spoke in French. I quickly put an end to that. And my family's a little bit competitive, so I not only put an end to that, I decided that I was going to surpass them in French. And I have. I was in the immersion program from grade 7 to the end of high school, and I had a choice between Carleton U Ottawa and Dalhousie. I ended up getting a job in Ottawa, so I was choosing between Carleton and U Ottawa. And for me, the big factor coming to U Ottawa was the immersion program. The EIL program, or the Études Internationales Langue Moderne program, it has a large number of required courses, and you can get rid of about a third of them by passing a French test and being in the French program. So all of a sudden that meant that I could add a minor onto my program, which was interesting, and let me have sort of the poli-sci aspect and a theater aspect. It also has the sort of pass-fail courses, and that took away a lot of the fear for me in taking university courses in French, or uniquement en français, and I could not have those appear on my transcript, at least as a grade, and so those two sort of factors made the decision for me between Carleton and U Ottawa. And then I found the Francophone community here to be very welcoming, very friendly, and so I've kind of stuck with them far more than the English community in Ottawa.
So I decided to continue in French, I think mostly because I grew up in a bilingual family, and I was very convinced that if I stopped studying French, then I would forget my French and I would not use it anymore, just because Edmonton is a very unilingual city and there's not a lot of opportunities to practice. I also have a lot of family that are Francophone and don't speak English, so I wanted to keep my ties with them as well. Also, when I started French immersion in grade 5, I spoke both languages, but I didn't read or write in English, and my reading and writing in French wasn't very good. So for me, there wasn't that aspect of, oh, English is going to be the easy way out for me. English is the solution. Like, I don't like French. That was not an issue for me. I always enjoyed learning in French. So since I didn't have that positive outlook on the English program at the university, there were more positives towards studying in French. Like, we have scholarships for learning in French. And there's also the class sizes are significantly smaller at the French campus. So my largest class there was 100 people, whereas the English campus, you get classes of 400 students in the introductory courses. So just because the classes are smaller, there's a lot more teacher support for students, and that was a big reason why I chose to study in French.
Thank you, Laurence. You kind of... Anyway, it's good because it's a nice lead into the other question about describing your program and the courses and probably the exchange, Bruno, if you did it. And thank you.
Great. So Simon Fraser University, the program that I graduated from is called the French Court Program. That's the short name. The long name is Programme d'administration publique et services communautaires, which is just abbreviated to French Court Program. The program, we have to choose when you enter the program between doing a political science major and a French extended minor, or vice versa. So those are kind of the two mainstream choices that students are presented when they enter the program. 75%, the requirement is that 75% of the classes are done in French. I remember kind of looking at the amount of credits that I had done in French, and it surpasses 75%. I think I ended up doing 85% of my courses in French. The program also requires a exchange, and so I had the opportunity to spend a year in Strasbourg, one of Europe's capitals, which was a great experience. I think that was probably one of the highlights of the program, was being able to kind of move away and use the language in a setting where you're no longer minority, because the reality of French in Vancouver is that you can go to a supermarket and say bonjour and someone's going to look at you like they understand the word, but that's about as far as you get, right? A lot of people do French immersion, but without practicing it, the language gets lost, and so it's not a common language used every day. So to be able to immerse yourself in a 100% French environment and experience a completely different culture was such an enriching opportunity. And besides that, the program has a very practical and almost like a hands-on kind of approach. So I remember working on a couple different research projects that the profs would assign to us. One of them, we were in our preliminary research, we realized that in Vancouver, 10% of homeless people are French speaking, and so that stood out to us. So we decided to kind of pursue that and do create our own research project, and went on and did our own field work on that. So the program is very diverse and has a very hands-on approach, and that exchange kind of just adds that kind of an enriching touch to it.
Nice. Erika, I'm going to transform a bit the question for Erika because she's in second year. So how is the challenge for you, I guess, in psychology? You're in second year, right?
Just finished second year. Yeah.
OK, d'accord. Donc, c'était quoi le défi d'être dans les classes en français?
J'ai pris plusieurs cours de contenu, de disciplinaire en français. Au moment où c'était en première année, j'ai senti un peu intimidée, car c'était un cours francophone, et j'ai réalisé très tôt que je ne suis pas seule, jamais est-ce que nous sommes seuls. Il y a les autres étudiants qui sont dans Immersion et spécifiquement les cours d'accompagnement m'ont aidé à me ressentir un peu plus sécure. Il y avait des autres qui avaient le même environnement que moi et je pouvais essayer de parler avec les autres francophones, avec les étudiants en immersion, même avec les profs. Il y avait vraiment une atmosphère qui était plus bienveillante que je ne le pensais pas. Especially when you're going into a course, it is such a comfort to feel that you're not alone. And it really helped me to be able to pursue my studies as I was. I started in a higher level, so at first it was also harder for me to take some FLS courses, which is French as a second language, because my level didn't match with some of the courses that would be from first year. And so I did end up taking quite a few disciplinary courses in my first year, more than I did FLS courses. So I really tried to kind of balance it out. Taking 50% of your courses can be difficult, which is why they only have the requirement to do 2 per semester in order to get your bursary. But even so, I try to take 2 or even 3 courses in French to be able to balance out the fact that this is an immersion program and I want to learn in French and in English. Mm-hmm.
Okay, merci. Kyle, do you want to describe your program?
Sure. I'm going to first touch on this. You mentioned feeling alone in some, or not feeling alone in some classes. Yeah. Whereas the first French language course that I took, so it was a law course. And I walked in, I was 3 minutes late, 4 minutes late. It's a Francophone only course. It's a French civil law course. I'm an Anglo from Toronto who has never taken a law course before. This doesn't really start well. I walk in, the first thing I understand is exam at 100%. Oh, Colin, OK, qu'est-ce que je me suis fait là? Puis même pendant la pause de ce cours-là, il y avait 3 ou 4 autres anglophones qui ont eu la même réaction que moi, puis on se reconnaissait dans la salle. Oh, you just did the exact same thing that I did, and so did you. And there was no sort of cours d'encadrement with that. There was no formal support from the immersion program for that course, because Anglos aren't really supposed to take that course. But there were the 4 of us who found each other very quickly in that class, created a little group, a little study group, and we got each other through that course. And none of us came out of that course with lower than an A-, which for 4 anglophones from Ontario is pretty damn good. Donc le régime ici, oui, il y a beaucoup de support avec les cours d'encadrement, avec les mentors, mais il y a aussi des supports informels. Et dans les cours de théâtre et dans les cours de droit que j'ai pris, on avait toujours ce petit groupe d'anglophones qui étaient souvent cachés dans un coin, puis se parlaient entre nous comme un pigeon de anglais-français pour s'entraider, puis pour comme fill in the holes where somebody didn't understand something. So my experience was a lot of that. I didn't take any of the 3581 or 2581 courses, the sort of language support courses. It just didn't work out in my schedule. I took a bunch of courses that I probably shouldn't have taken, but the way the program was structured, and my work schedule was structured, I didn't have much choice in that, but was able to do that because of the pass-fail courses. There's a date in November, I think, when students in the immersion program can elect to continue with the course but not have that grade appear anywhere. So you're going in, you get to sort of 2/3 of the way through November, and you go, yeah, I'm going to pass, but I'm going to pass with a 65, and that's going to kill my average. You just make that grade disappear. You still get the credits, and you can do that over your first 2 years, I believe.
Just the 2 years, yeah.
But sort of during 2 years, that gives you confidence, that gives you a support, even if there is no encadrement linguistique, to take those courses. So for me, that was a big part of how the program worked. I also ended up taking a lot of my theater courses, which was my minor, in French, mostly because it either fit my schedule better or I liked the profs better. And that meant that I was surrounded by, there were 2 Anglos in these theater courses, there were 25 Francophones. So I'm immediately surrounded by Francophones who like to go out and party, who like to have a lot of fun. It's theater, it's arts. You can imagine what happens. And so that very quickly threw me into a very Francophone environment as well. And it was sort of a sink or swim. I didn't have a choice. If I wanted to make friends, if I wanted to meet people, it had to be in French. And they're very friendly. They'll help me out. But my experience with the immersion program was a lot more on the informal side, the sort of meeting people and creating those links that they are now people that I work with. They're people that I'm still in contact with, and I graduated Immersion in 2011. So that's sort of their long-term relationships that have been developed because of the Francophone courses and the fact that we are not alone, but you find those other people who are in there with you.
So something I'd like to point out that's different about the university in Alberta is that there's no class that an Anglophone is not supposed to take. So our university, pretty much all the French immersion programs will lead you to be prepared for the university. So there's actually a wide variety of people who go there, and a big part of them are Anglophones who did French immersion. So they have placement exams when you first start university to assess what level of French you're at so that you get placed in the proper French classes. But there is a minimum requirement to achieve in French to be able to get your bilingual degree. So people can start at different French classes, but they still have to get to the same place in the end. We also have some Francophones, and we also have a lot of international students who come from Africa who also take the programs at our school. I think I mentioned a lot before, but I think that's the main idea.
Okay. All right, I like this question. So tell me, maybe if you could name one of your successes and one of your biggest challenge. La plus belle réussite, Bruno.
Je ne sais pas si j'en ai une de mes plus grandes. J'ai beaucoup pensé à cette question avant d'arriver ici. Je pense que ma plus grande réussite présentement, ça serait d'avoir été accepté en droit et d'avoir la chance de continuer mes études en droit. Je dois cette expérience-là en grande partie au programme dont j'ai fait partie durant mes 4 ans à Simon Fraser. Donc ça serait probablement ma plus grande réussite, mais j'ai aussi eu beaucoup d'emplois que j'ai décrochés en raison de mon bilinguisme. Est-ce qu'on parle juste des réussites ou des défis aussi?
Allez, un défi.
Un défi. Pour moi, le défi, surtout quand on parle dans un contexte où est-ce que le français est en contexte minoritaire, c'est de prendre avantage de l'offre active. Parce que, je veux dire, souvent, quand on est à l'aéroport, on reçoit on a le « hello, bonjour ». C'est pas, ça m'est arrivé plus qu'une fois d'avoir le « hello, bonjour ». Et pour quelqu'un pour un service fédéral ou n'importe quel service qui se veut bilingue et qui a une affiche qui dit service bilingue, je trouve le défi, c'est toujours de vraiment dire, tu sais quoi, je vais faire un challenge à cette personne-là et de parler en français et de pouvoir passer à travers la sécurité en français et d'avoir une discussion en français. Je pense que ça, c'est un des plus gros défis. Puis moi, je m'en rends pas compte, mais c'est juste un petit défi qu'on peut faire à chaque fois. Si je peux me permettre, je pose un deuxième défi qui me posait problème durant mes études postsecondaires. C'était l'utilité des programmes de correction comme Antidote. Moi, je me servais comme ça, comme la Bible. Et le défi avec ces programmes-là, c'est que c'est super facile que le programme s'est rendu tellement avancé que ça l'attrape la majorité des fautes grammaticales. Sauf que moi, quand je l'utilisais, le programme, je faisais juste un double-clic pour changer et je voulais pas savoir pourquoi j'avais fait la faute. Puis je pense que ça rejoint un point que ma collègue ici parlait, c'est qu'on a comme une certaine peur et qu'on est seul. Mais moi, on est dans un programme de 25. Je suis sûr que je ne suis pas le seul qui avait des problèmes avec mon écriture. Donc, c'était vraiment de prendre le temps de corriger et de développer mon français à l'écrit. Et c'était de ne pas trop se fier sur ces programmes de correction.
Okay, I'm just going to allow myself just to translate what he just said very briefly, but his biggest accomplishment is that he's in the law program, but the French law program here at Ottawa U. So that's extraordinaire. And the other one is the challenge at security, that we should be speaking French there. Okay. Erika?
Pour moi, le plus grand défi, c'était plutôt au secondaire. L'écriture, oui, il présente des difficultés, mais au long du terme où j'étais au secondaire, j'ai trouvé que j'ai amélioré chaque fois, chaque année, dans mon écriture et même à l'oral. Mais pour moi, c'était, est-ce que j'ai la confiance que je pouvais me submerger dans un contexte ou un environnement complètement français, puis est-ce que je peux survivre? Alors, j'ai décidé, après ma 11e année, de faire un échange juste pour un mois pendant les vacances d'été. Et pour moi, j'étais trop nerveuse pendant toute la vol. Puis, quand j'ai arrivé, ils m'ont demandé comment était le vol. Puis, j'ai communiqué comme je pensais était acceptable. Puis, ils m'ont regardé et ils ont dit, vous pouvez parler en français. On a pensé que vous arrivez avec zéro, une aptitude zéro, et vous allez vous immerser tout à nouveau. Alors, pour moi, cette expérience m'a donné la confiance qui était, je peux parler. Mes professeurs m'ont toujours aidé, m'ont supporté dans mes enquêtes d'aller parler et d'écrire en français. And then that turned into more of a success that when I became nervous, I was able to transform it into the confidence that I had that led me to take my immersion studies for the rest of my career. And then the second one, I actually kind of owe it to Catherine Buchanan, and as well as my immersion studies here at the University of Ottawa. This summer, I'm going to be doing a research project in a laboratory that's bilingual here at the University of Ottawa because I was able to write a motivation letter that impressed, obviously, a professor. And I wrote it all in French. I wrote my complete lettre de motivation en français, puis j'ai donné un CV en anglais et en français. Puis, ils m'ont accepté et maintenant, je fais quelque chose comme ça. C'est vraiment une opportunité que je dois saisir avec tous mes efforts. Mm-hmm.
Est-ce que tu veux à l'université ou dans la vie en général?
Université, Madame me dit.
For me, the greatest success, university success in French or in the immersion program wasn't actually in the immersion program. It was that the immersion program let me take a course, a master's degree in French. And it was... the courses were all in French. My case studies were all in French. My profs were all francophones. There was very little actually, there was no support for that. There is no immersion program at the graduate level that I'm aware of here. But because I'd gone through the immersion program, I was able to do that. I was allowed to write my thesis in English, but all of the rest of the coursework over 2 years at the graduate level was in French. And so I think that, for me, is, at least at the university level, probably the greatest success that I've had in French. I'm also now teaching in that program in French, so one of those two. The biggest difficulty, I don't really know. I found it difficult to accept at the university in the first couple of years that while the University of Ottawa se veut bilingue, se veut l'université bilingue, il y a clairement des préférences chez certaines personnes pour les francophones ou les anglophones. You go to, for example, the library, and depending on who you're talking to, you'll get a very different quality of service in English and in French. And when I started here, that favored a whole lot more the francophones. Now it's more even in how it is uneven, in the sense that there are more people who will favor the anglophones than there were 10 years ago, or 8 years ago. But you still get that sort of, there are still people here who, resent's not quite the right word, but who aren't yet fully comfortable with the idea that this is a bilingual institution. And for me, accepting that and not, de ne pas devenir combatif, de ne pas m'obstiner, non, je veux vous parler en anglais ou je veux vous parler en français, ça c'était un défi pour moi. I came here as a student who wants to speak both languages, who wants to be bilingual, and there were some sort of institutional difficulties that I, on a personal level, had a hard time accepting. A lot of that just comes down to what language that person's more comfortable in. And I'm very lucky that the program here has let me be very comfortable in both, but I had a hard time accepting that wasn't the case for everybody here.
So I'm not the only one to say that writing was my biggest challenge, but I would also say it's one of my biggest successes in immersion as well. So the transition from high school French immersion to university French immersion was very difficult. Like the young student we saw this morning who said that, like, once you get into university, you never read anything as difficult as you do in high school, even from the French immersion program. So, but not only that, also in English, it was a big transition as well for writing as well, because in French immersion, you're doing all of your writing in French except for your English classes. So you don't have the same practice as you do as the English students do, because they do all of their writing in English. But with practice, so like I said earlier, I'm in the science program, and in science you have labs, and in labs you have to write lab reports, scientific articles, and at Campus Saint-Jean we don't have the option to write our exams or our essays in English, in the opposite language. So it was quite difficult in the beginning because obviously there's always a section for your French, and you always lose marks if you have bad grammar or bad spelling or anything like that. But with so much practice, I've developed such an academic French now, and I'm so used to writing in French that the first time last semester I had to write my paper in English for biology class, and I was finding myself translating from French to English, even though I speak English every day, but I haven't developed that academic language in English because I take all my classes in French. So I think that's one of my greatest successes, and I never thought that would ever happen to me, that I'd be translating from French to English, not the other way around, but yeah.
Thank you. So, I guess, Bruno, how do you imagine your bilingual future?
So, being in law, I do find it's very important to find an employment position where I'm serving clients in both French and English. The reality is, in Ontario or in any province where French is a minority language, people are not as comfortable proceeding with legal proceedings in French. They're much more comfortable, even if they speak French, they will oftentimes choose to go in English. So I think, my future is to sit down with potential clients and say, listen, in Ontario, you have the right to be heard in French. You have lawyers who can provide services in French. And it will not take longer, it won't cost more, and you can express yourself in the language of your choice. So it would be to kind of find a place where I can practice in both languages, and in an environment where I can promote access to justice in French.
Thank you. Erika?
For me, I definitely plan on completing all of my studies, whether it be just at the undergraduate level or at the graduate level, especially for psychology, in French immersion. And I think it would be really helpful for the future to be able to speak both languages. And I have a third language, which I'm also very proud to. I really need to practice on it, actually. And maybe someday to take a fourth language. Every language you take opens you up to a new world and a new community that offers you so much more experience, and a community of people that you never would have gotten to meet otherwise. And so for me, that's really important. J'envisage dans le futur scolaire, je veux faire un stage ou un échange à l'étranger. C'est absolument un de mes buts principaux. Ça serait quelque chose qui va me donner plus de confiance, et cette fois, je veux le faire dans un contexte scolaire pour voir la vie quotidienne. Chaque fois que je suis allée dans le passé, every time that I've gone abroad in the past has been in vacation mode. And everyone has that joie de vivre. They all have free time, and so people are happier then. But I really want to see what people are like in their day-to-day lives. And I know that all cultures will be different. Everyone has a different perspective on what it means to be successful, what it means to be happy. And for me, I need to see that. And so for me, the world will be something that I imagine myself going towards every day of my life if I can.
Je suis un anglophone qui vient de Toronto de parents pas mal unilingues anglophones. J'habite ici, je travaille presque uniquement en français. With the exception of one 6-month job in a cafe, all of the jobs I've worked in Ottawa have been bilingual or French only. I live with somebody who's Franco-Colombian, francophone from BC, and we sort of switch back and forth between English and French. So for me, the question, you could sort of remove the word bilingual. My life already is bilingual. And so I kind of have a hard time answering the question. For me, how do I imagine a bilingual future? For me, that's what I live right now. And that's what various levels of study and support, formally and informally, have let me become, is comfortable with the fact that I am bilingual. Je suis pas franco-ontarien, mais je suis pas un anglophone non plus. Je suis francophile, oui, où il y a apparemment un terme académique de francophone de langue maternelle anglaise, which is ugly as a term. Mais ça serait le plus comme pertinent pour moi de me dire que je suis francophone de langue maternelle anglaise. I switch back and forth in thoughts, in writing, in all of that. So for me, I don't really need to imagine a bilingual future because that's what I am.
Well, I think my answer is going to be the most pessimistic out of all of them. Honestly, I think, yeah, my bilingual future is looking pretty grim if I stay in Alberta, just because there aren't that many opportunities unless you go work for the government. Honestly, every job I've ever had, I've never even needed French. And I think one day I want to come back to the east of Canada, just because French is more prevalent here and you can speak with people in French. But right now I don't have any specific plans, but at least I have the option to come back if I want.
Okay, thank you. I was going to say, come here, we'll hire you. Okay. Okay, from Kyle, we have answers to that question, and I believe also with Bruno, but how did this university immersion influence your linguistic or cultural identity, and to what level, I guess, and also with Erica, it's a little more complex, but how do you embrace how is your French part? How is it amalgamated into your persona? Bruno.
I mean, for a long time, and this might sound surprising, I had difficulty identifying with the term francophone, even though, même si je parlais en français à la maison, même si je faisais partie du programme d'immersion à l'université, durant mon secondaire, j'avais une période où est-ce que je me considérais pas francophone, mais je pense que en allant dans un milieu académique, puis je pense que c'est surtout dans un milieu académique où est-ce que le français est langue minoritaire, mais minoritaire encore plus qu'il est en Ontario, on se rend compte que c'est que le français, même si tout le monde parle un français différent, et c'est un peu la particularité du français en Colombie-Britannique, c'est que le français est vraiment divers. C'est des gens de partout, c'est de la France, du Québec, des pays africains, c'est un français vraiment divers. Et donc, c'est un peu là où est-ce que j'ai appris à vraiment identifier puis m'intégrer dans cette identité francophone. Et au niveau culturel, ben, je veux dire, je visite souvent ma famille à Montréal. Je communique toujours avec ma mère en français. Puis, je veux dire, je tiens tout le temps ces liens culturels-là.
For me, like, linguistic and cultural identity has never really been a question of like how it would change from one period to another. It's always been a part of my life to be as I am. I grew up, je me suis agrandie bilingue, puis quand j'ai commencé des études en français dans l'immersion, j'ai commencé à être trilingue. So it was always a case that I found myself feeling as if I was more international than I really gave myself credit for. That I could be a bunch of people at the same time in different language contexts and never really feel too far from myself as a person, as an individual that could speak more than one language. I've also never really asked myself, do you find yourself as an Anglophone or as a Francophone? I've just always been bilingual, trilingual, and it's never been a question of do you have to limit yourself to even just one name. I'm just a plurilingual. That was one that we used, I think, yesterday that was kind of interesting to me. I'd never really heard it. But all of us come from like different cultures, all of our backgrounds, and so I don't think we could limit ourselves to one identity or one label. And so for me, it was a development. It's a continuous development throughout my entire life that I'm always going to be someone who's invested in languages, who's invested in the world, who's invested in topics that you'll find everywhere in your life. And so for me, yeah, it's always just been positive.
The immersion experience gave me the confidence to go out and meet Francophones, and speak to them in French. I had done extended at high school, so I was comfortable speaking with Anglophones in French and having sort of 5 Anglophones and we speak in French together. And that was the first couple courses that I took at the university as well, where we'd hide in a corner, not hide, but on se cacherait dans un coin puis parler les 2 langues. Puis à fur et à mesure, je rencontre plus de francophones, ils me parlent en français, pardon. Ils me laissent parler en anglais quand je suis fatigué or whatever, but they always sort of try and bring me back to French or brought me back to French and supported the fact that, yeah, I have an accent and yeah, 7 years ago, that accent was very strong, but that's fine. I'm trying to speak French, and I found particularly in smaller communities or in smaller groups that that's the case, that they will support somebody who's trying to learn French, and that gave me the confidence to keep trying and to keep trying and to keep trying with profs who end up hiring me on projects and I can draw a fairly straight, although wiggly line from the immersion program to my job right now with the connections that I made, where I met one person who introduced me to another, so on, and I'm now working in a Francophone theater company. I've also had that same sort of very warm experience in Francophone communities, minority Francophone communities, when I go and visit. And they hear my accent in French and they look at my name and they go, you're not from around here, but you're trying to speak French. Cool, let's speak in French. And sort of I got a microcosm of that in the immersion program or through the immersion program, and that has been a big influence on the fact that I'm neither Anglophone or Francophone, I'm me.
Well, what was the question? Okay, sorry. I'm having a moment here. So when somebody asks me how I relate my identity to my languages, I usually say I'm bilingual, but I think at this point I more identify as an Anglophone who speaks French because I've lived in an Anglophone culture for so long. But university specifically, I think I've developed an academic association with French because that's the main language that I learn in, and I've developed such a large vocabulary for academic sciences, pretty much. And I mostly speak in English with my friends, and it's the language that I use to make jokes or have fun with. So I associate English more with having fun, and I associate French more with school, unfortunately. But yeah, I think it's, I probably could try a little bit harder to speak French with my friends and develop that fun for French, but unfortunately a lot of my friends don't speak French, so it poses a problem.
Thank you. That was lovely. Thank you so much to the four of you. Si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas. C'est maintenant. Oui, Marc.
Merci d'avoir participé. Je suis heureusement en contact avec des étudiants constamment. C'est toujours agréable de voir des étudiants qui ont passé à travers quelque chose et qui sont rendus à d'autres niveaux. L'été dernier, on a fait un sondage des diplômés du régime d'immersion. Et une des questions qu'on avait posées, on avait une série d'énoncés. One of the questions, not even a question, a statement, do you agree? I fear for my long-term abilities in French. And we asked this of our 750 graduates. Over 50% of them said, yes, I fear for my long-term abilities in French. One of the students to whom we gave our prize yesterday, Anna, she graduated with like a 9.99 out of 10. Son français est impeccable. But she was telling me last night she has not spoken French in 8 months. And she works here in Ottawa for Microsoft. Or one former student, Miranda, who lives in Edmonton, puis elle dit la même chose. Marc, ça fait depuis le mois d'août que j'ai pas parlé français. So how do you, I mean, Kyle, toi t'es chanceux, tu travailles dans un domaine francophone, but surely you have friends who've done immersion, who've studied with you, and who at some point just fell off the wagon. Have you seen that, and doesn't that make you fear for your own bilingual future?
Is that directed just at me or at everybody?
Tout le monde. Mais c'est parce que Laurence l'a mentionné tout à l'heure aussi. Elle a dit, I'm pessimistic.
Yeah.
On va commencer avec toi.
Well, I was always scared of losing my French since I moved to Edmonton. And frankly, I've met people who have left the French immersion program earlier, and now they don't speak a word of French. They almost forgot everything. But I think at this point, especially at the Campus Saint-Jean in Edmonton, you do so much French that I think at this point it would be difficult to lose it entirely. Obviously, you'd become really rusty and you'd have to practice again and obviously make mistakes. But I think if the effort was put in afterwards, it would come back because you've been surrounded by French for so long at this point that I think it would be hard to lose it completely altogether.
I do live in French, and one of the critiques I made of the immersion program when I was here, and this will sound vaguely familiar to Mark probably, is that taking a bunch of Anglophones and putting them into a room and making them speak French doesn't. They speak French. They often don't have a choice on the matter, but French is not a fun language. They don't live in French. They don't usually think in French. And so for me, and what I noticed between the Anglophone friends who did the immersion program and who still speak French and those who don't, is whether they did it just in the classroom and it stayed academic and it stayed in a box over there and outside of the classroom we don't deal with French, or whether they would go and see movies in French or go to a party in French, or whether they would live in French and let French also be a language of fun, the way that you sort of split the two languages. And that's, I look at friends who are very smart, who did very well in the immersion program here, and have gone off to the States or gone off to do a master's at Queen's or things like that. And here in the immersion program, never lived in French. They took courses in French, and when they leave school, that just sort of stays behind. And so that's the difference I've seen, is people who participate not only in French classes, but French culture. And that can be here. I have friends also who've gone off to Alberta and who are working for the, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but the Alberta Ministry of Francophone, whatever that department is called. And so who are engaged in the Francophone community there, or in Winnipeg, in Saint Boniface. And because they get engaged in the Francophone community, they keep their language, whereas those who go off to Queen's and don't engage with the community in Kingston lose their language.
I would agree with most of your points. They do make a lot of sense. But also in my case, just you have to surround yourself with certain types of people, and whether they be monolingual, just Francophone, just Anglophone, or even plurilingual. I have a lot of Francophone friends that I tried to kind of push myself outside the box. When you said with a bunch of Anglophones put into a Francophone class, there's kind of the fear that what if you only interact with those people? You want to interact with the Francophone people to get the full experience. And I found it really helpful when actually the accompaniment course came after my first course in the disciplinary one. And so I wouldn't know who were the immersion students beforehand, and I had a hard time kind of like figuring out who they were. So for me, my biggest step, even in just university in general, was go talk to someone. They're probably just as nervous as you are, and if you just say hi, it's either going to work out or it's not. And so I really tried, and I made quite a few friends that are Francophone. And it's hard because in social context, I find when you're surrounded with Francophone people that know Anglophone people, they'll just switch over to English because they think it's easier automatically. It's not. We want the chance to speak. So I'll tell them, I'll be like, je veux parler en français, est-ce que c'est d'accord? Je suis compétente, je peux vous suivre. Ils sont OK, c'est d'accord, on va parler en français. Et ça dure pour quelques minutes, et après ils reviennent à l'anglais, et je suis comme, I was trying to speak in French with you. But it works out. And so for me, it was more, I tried to find opportunities to do this. I'm working at a cashier at a store in Ottawa, actually out in Stittsville, which is interesting. So it's majorly English, but there are some French people, and they don't expect it, but when they're in the line, you can hear them, and so I'll be like, hello, bonjour, and they'll look at me, they'll be like, oh, she can speak French. And it makes me kind of happy because I'm able to use it. But a lot of these customers, especially when they're regulars, they remember that I spoke French to them, and they'll come back and they'll be like, "Oh, bonjour, mademoiselle," and then, it just makes me so happy because it's like when you create an impression because you're different, and so really just look for the opportunity, and if you do, I think you'll have an easier time maintaining your languages. Mm-hmm.
Jérémy? Pardon. Jérémy, chaos total. J'ai coupé la parole à Bruno avant qu'il la prenne. Excuse-moi, Bruno.
Moi, j'avais juste un commentaire sur la phrase. C'était, je me souviens plus exactement c'est quoi la question. C'était, do you fear you're going to lose your French? I fear for my long term. I think I kind of take issue with the question because it imposes it's a passive role. And the reality of speaking French outside of Quebec is that you have to take an active role, right? It's a choice. And I think it comes back to Kyle's point of engagement. So you have to take an active role. You have to seek out opportunities. And so this idea of, do you fear of losing your French? Yes, that fear can be there. But that fear the remedy to that fear is to go out and find opportunities for yourself to join a French-speaking club. I mean, even in Vancouver, there are opportunities to do these 5 à 7, practice your French. And I think it also comes back to your idea to have students, if you make the point of, I want to speak in French, respecting that, and so that person that you're conversing with will also improve their French. But I think it all comes down to engagement and making an active choice of continuing to speak the language.
If I can follow up to that, we did have that question too in the survey, and that's what I find really interesting is that students don't seem to have sont pas vraiment impliqués dans la vie culturelle francophone, que ce soit le théâtre, le cinéma, la musique, la télévision, les films. Alors ce que vous avez dit justement, je pense que vous avez mis le doigt sur le bon bouton. Il faut le faire, il faut le vouloir, il faut s'engager. Ça se passe pas par osmose.
Oui, vas-y, Laurence.
Just a counter argument to that. So like I said earlier, I've developed academic language in French. But the reality of science is that most scientific articles are only written in French. I do all my research in English. In English, sorry. I do all my research in English, and I have to translate it into French to write my articles. So I don't even see myself keeping my academic French in that regard, because if I wanted to publish a scientific article, I wouldn't be writing it in French anyway. So where would I find the opportunity to write like that in French again? In my field of study or work or.
I took the question more as a general way of keeping the French, not in a specific field, because I can understand that being in Edmonton writing scientific articles is challenging. So
Anywhere.
Yeah.
Because at one point I was going to say Europe, and then said no. Jérémy.
en même temps, je suis tout à fait d'accord avec ce qui a été dit. Il y a aussi la partie action, c'est très personnel, comment on va s'engager ou pas. Et la question que je voulais poser, c'est même dans le pire des cas, vous quittez l'université, vous avez fait votre programme en immersion, vous déménagez en Chine, dans un petit village, vous êtes embauché pour parler qu'en chinois, vous êtes dans la 4e année. Vous ne pouvez plus parler le français pour 10 ans. Est-ce que vous regrettez la décision d'avoir fait le programme en immersion ou est-ce que ça reste quand même si on ne continue pas à l'utiliser pendant 10 ans?
C'est une bonne question, ça.
Aucun regret. Pour moi, la réponse est très, très simple.
Je ne regretterai la décision jamais. C'est vraiment une opportunité qui était positive pour moi et pour plusieurs autres que je connais. Ils ont dit, oui, mais le français, ça fait partie de ce que je suis maintenant. Ce n'est pas quelque chose que nous pouvons abandonner juste par ne pas le parler. For me, I haven't taken a German course. German is my third language. I think you could probably guess for now. I haven't taken a German course at the university level yet, and I've definitely planned to in my third year, hopefully. But I'm not going to abandon the idea that I took German all throughout high school on Saturdays. And that was a part of my daily routine. I spoke with my mother in German, my family members. And it's not something that you can just give up or lose. And I get that, yeah, you'll become rusty. But if I were to go to Germany right now, it would take me probably about a few days, up to about 2 weeks, to get into the mood. And I think I'd be speaking almost with a German accent from what I hear. I could probably do it. But it's never something that you'll really lose. And I would never want to regret something that became a part of me so early on. Mm-hmm.
I've sort of had, in the EIL program, you have to take a third language. My third language was Spanish. I did an exchange to Chile for 6 months where I lived only in Spanish. I came back sounding Chileno. I haven't really spoken Spanish since, so I have sort of that experience with the Spanish language. I've a couple times met friends, and we will speak in Spanish, and most of us have that same sort of relationship where we haven't spoken Spanish in, that's now been 7 years, whatever. And so I don't regret that at all, because it does come back after about 10 hours, and we're, pardon? That helps. It does help because you stop thinking about, was that conjugated correctly or whatever. You just let yourself go. And I've also found with both French and Spanish, there are thoughts that occur that only occur in that language that I can't. J'arrive pas à formuler en anglais like the one I just did. And so that will never be completely absent. And no, I will not regret either language.
I would never regret it either. To me, obviously, you learn a lot about culture. You get a lot from learning in French, a lot more opportunities. But in the end, you still get a functional education. So if you get a job in China, your French degree helped you get there in some way. So I don't, it wouldn't be a regret to me at all to, obviously, kind of sad to stop speaking French, but that's okay. I don't know.
I had an experience last summer where we're in Georgia, just south of Russia, Georgia, the country, and we're on a bus in the middle of Tbilisi, and there are 4 francophones, well, 3 francophones plus me, whatever I am, and we're speaking in French because that's how we're speaking, and one of the police officers who's in the bus comes up to us and starts speaking in French because he had taken courses in French at high school or university, whatever, and he was so happy to be able to speak in French for the 30 seconds that it took to check our tickets. So I haven't been to China, but if I can go to Georgia, to Tbilisi, downtown Tbilisi, and speak to somebody in French, I think that no matter where I go, I will probably be able to find a little bit of French.
Oui, Claire.
Récemment, un de mes collègues à l'université qui enseigne au département de français a fait un cours sur la francophonie. Il y a un étudiant francophile qui a dit, mais moi, ça me gêne, ce qualificatif de francophile, parce que c'est comme si tu es moins bon que... Hein? Et il parlait un excellent français. Alors, j'aimerais savoir comment vous répondez à ce questionnement par rapport à la définition qu'on donne à ce qu'est un francophone, et est-ce que vous vous casez dans cette francophilie dans laquelle on vous met parfois? Et moi, ça m'amène à réfléchir justement à comment on appelle notre bureau. Est-ce qu'on a vraiment besoin d'appeler le bureau des affaires francophones et francophiles, ou est-ce que c'est dépassé déjà? Alors, comment vous réagissez à cette appellation dans laquelle parfois on essaie de vous caser?
Est-ce que ce bureau est ici en Ontario ou ailleurs?
Non, Burnaby.
Burnaby.
Ouais.
Merci.
Vous venez de partout au Canada.
Je pose la question parce que les Françaisquois, les francophones en Saskatchewan, ont une définition assez particulière dans c'est quoi un Françaisquois par rapport au reste du Franco-Canada. C'est que c'est tout le monde qui veut parler en français peut être Françaisquois. Peu importe s'ils sont anglophones de naissance, francophones de naissance, allophones de naissance. Puis moi, j'aime cette définition-là. Je trouve qu'il y a deux générations en Ontario de c'est quoi la francophonie ontarienne. Il y a comme la vieille école, vieille pensée de il faut être de souche, term that I hate, des choses comme ça. Puis il y a une deuxième génération, surtout plus jeune, qui accepte n'importe qui veut parler en français. Fait que je pense qu'on s'enligne un peu vers ça. Et moi, je m'identifie beaucoup plus à cette idée françaisquois de c'est quoi la francophonie. Je ne suis pas francophile, dans le sens où je n'ai pas un moindre appartenance à la communauté ici que quelqu'un qui est né en français puis qui n'en a pas parlé depuis 20 ans. Mais eux sont ayant droit. So, c'est ça ma réponse?
Bruno?
Je pense que le terme francophone puis le terme francophile, ça crée une certaine appréhension pour certaines personnes. Surtout le terme francophile, parce que ça crée comme un seuil. Et je pense que pour assurer une certaine vitalité du français au Canada puis ailleurs, ce seuil-là, on doit être plus inclusif. Puis pour être plus inclusif dans le terme, on doit avoir une certaine ouverture à inclure le plus de monde possible dans la catégorie. Là, la question devient, est-ce qu'on garde le terme francophone et francophile et quand est-ce qu'un francophile devient un francophone? Parce que moi, je me suis posé la même question aussi parce que je m'identifiais comme francophile et non comme francophone, mais maintenant, je suis francophone. Et donc, c'est un peu... Je trouve que l'identité... puis un des problèmes avec le terme en général, c'est que c'est souvent un terme qu'un groupe de personnes va mettre sur quelqu'un d'autre. Mais je trouve que ça devrait être l'inverse. Ça devrait être une personne qui se dit, moi, je m'identifie comme francophone, francophile, et l'autre personne, quelqu'un d'autre, peut pas... they can't challenge that. Et si toi, tu t'identifies comme francophile, t'es francophile. C'est pas quelque chose que je pense qui devrait être défini avec des règles rigides.
C'est quand tu as changé de francophile à francophone? Je peux demander?
Puisque j'ai fait le programme d'immersion en postsecondaire, puis peut-être dans ma première ou deuxième année d'université. Je me souviens plus exactement quand, mais parce que quand quelqu'un comme moi-même, quand je voyage au Québec, j'ai un petit accent, des fois je cherche un petit mot ici et là, et donc je me sentais pas parfait. Mais je pense pas qu'il y a pas un français parfait. Il y a personne qui parle un français parfait. Tout le monde, on est tous un résultat de nos vécus. Et donc, je pense que c'est à respecter l'unicité de chaque individu. Et donc, c'est ça. La question, c'est quand? C'était deuxième année d'université, je pense.
Il n'y avait pas un moment de déclic.
C'était pas un moment que je me souviens, bang.
Mais
non.
Bruno, ta mère n'est pas francophone?
Ma mère est francophone, donc elle a appris l'anglais comme langue seconde et quand elle parle, elle a un petit accent quand elle parle un accent francophone quand elle parle en anglais. Mon père est unilingue, il comprend tout en français,
Oui.
mais il est anglophone. La langue à la maison, c'est l'anglais, mais je peux parler avec ma mère en français, mon père comprend tout. Donc, c'est vraiment une situation où je choisis la langue.
Je suis absolument d'accord avec Bruno. Nous ne pourrions jamais nous limiter à ce que quelqu'un d'autre nous dise. C'est pas une question d'être francophone ou francophile. Au moins pour moi, à mon avis, c'est plus... c'est à nous de nous choisir comment nous identifions. Comme pour moi, c'est la bilinguisme, c'était toujours, d'après moi, une partie de mon identité. I would never really concern myself with like what would be my origin. Yes, I'd say principally I would probably speak more English. That's probably the first one I heard because that's what the doctors would have spoken in the hospital. But after that, it was half and half, really. It's like, it's a girl. That's an English word. And so really it's a case of like you get to define who you're going to be. Even if you just call yourself a person of the world. And that could be your choice, but it's not to anyone else to tell you whether you're below someone, above someone, whether you have a perfect mastery of anything. It's just your decision.
OK. OK. Je finis avec Laurence. D'accord.
Okay. Je voulais juste rajouter quelque chose à propos que quand les autres personnes t'identifient pour toi, comme j'ai habité à Québec et j'ai habité en Alberta, donc j'ai habité dans les deux cultures. Puisque je venais d'une famille qui parlait surtout anglais à la maison parce que mon père était anglophone, quand j'étais à Québec, les gens m'identifiaient comme une personne anglophone. Mais là, quand je suis déménagée en Alberta, mon anglais n'était pas aussi bon que les autres, donc j'étais considérée francophone. Alors, d'après moi, ça dépend de où est-ce qu'on vit au Canada, mais je pense que c'est difficile de s'identifier exactement soit francophone ou anglophone parce que ça dépend beaucoup de la culture d'où on vit. Mais moi, j'interprète francophone comme... C'est un mot intimidant, puis je sais pas si je m'identifie comme étant francophone parce que je pense les francophones, ils doivent parler vraiment bien, ils font jamais d'erreurs, des choses comme ça. Ouais. Mais c'est juste c'est comment moi j'identifie francophone. Et anglophone, probablement je fais des erreurs des fois, mais en anglais, je trouve que je parle beaucoup mieux. C'est plus facile. Je pense moins quand je parle anglais. Donc, il y a aussi la différence de où est-ce qu'on vit.
Merci beaucoup de vos beaux témoignages. Thank you very much to her students. Okay. All right. So there's a break of 10 minutes, and you can have exchanges.